It has been said that when an author writes a novel, and then proceeds to introduce magic or miracles into the story, this is lazy story writing, a plot convenience, to make the story work, because the author could not come up with a more satisfactory way to complete the story. The plot was not very well created. It is a lazy form of story writing, and doesn't really provide you with anything much to learn for practical purposes, and most likely fanciful nonsense. So too, it is, when it comes to scientific theory development, when appealing to other hypothetical entities to prop up a speculation-based analysis of a phenomenon with an ad hoc guess that cannot be tested by experiment or observation. Of course, there are often only two possible fundamental beliefs about the ultimate explanation for the origin of everything. It is either purely unguided natural causation or supernatural causation, and science is much better at investigating the former, rather than the latter. Therefore, there is a tendency for some scientists to dislike the latter. That in itself doesn't prove the supernatural wrong, it's just mostly beyond the reach of science. And that makes it undesirable in the science room. But reality doesn't care about a scientist's likes or dislikes. Reality is, whatever it is. Some have claimed that there is no physical evidence for the supernatural, while others claim that there is. The intelligent design advocates say that the fine-tuning of the universe points to a god, while the materialists say that it can be explained by the possible existence of a multiverse. So both sides have their own ad hoc explanation for the fine-tuned parameters of the physical life-permitting laws of our seemingly anthropocentric universe. If an infinite number of other universes exist besides the only universe that we see, all containing their own set of physical parameters different to each other, and so every possibility is played out across this huge landscape of combinatorial possibility space, then this would make our universe just a sheer accident. Various multiverse concepts have been adopted by physicists for a number of reasons, and, for these exclusive materialists, there are a number of problems in physics and astronomy that they suggest could be solved if there were, not just this universe, but an infinite number of other universes. One of those problems is, whenever a quantum particle changes its state, there is nothing yet discovered, in the laws of physics that direct it to change that state in one particular way or another. Physicists don't know how it chooses to do that. The easy way out, for a possible explanation, is to say that there is a certain kind of multiverse, maybe an infinite number of parallel realities or multiple branching timelines, and every possibility is played out, and so some may feel that it might become understandable in that way. Another problem is, when astronomers look out into space they see as far as they can possibly see, but what is beyond that, they do not know. Perhaps more of the same. Perhaps it goes on forever. Or are there other realms out there as well, other universes? Another problem is when physicists try developing theories that attempt to join our feeble understanding of gravity with our limited understanding of the other forces of nature. This has led to ideas like string theory, where different dimensions of existence have been postulated to try and provide natural places where perhaps other universes might be found. So they hope that in all these different ways there could be found multiple universes. Finding such possibilities sounds great for possibly explaining the physical laws and their specified precision, but, if it were true, it makes our universe just a sheer accident, and we happen to be in it just because it happens to be the one where all the conditions are precisely right for life as we know it. Depending on people's worldview, or their irrational emotional preferences, they would either prefer a purely naturalistic explanation or a theological one. Many might prefer it if there wasn't a multiverse, because if the universe that we see around us now is all that exists, then that causes us to find a reason for why the one universe is just the way it is, and not something different, and so we could look for greater meaning and purpose in it all, instead of only pointless nihilism and ultimate hopelessness. But the more stoic rationalist agnostics among us will point out that, whatever our desires are or whatever we might like to think, the universe doesn't care. It will just turn out to be whatever it is, and do what it does. to the extent that we could ever find out. So it seems if one wants to avoid supernatural intelligent design as an explanation for all the finely tuned functionality around us that we see in the natural world, then there has to be a commitment by such ones to positing naturalistic ad hoc non-testable unobservable hypothetical entities to avoid the otherwise theological implications of it all. So just like the lazy novelist who cannot come up with a complete logical pathway in the plotline of his story and pens in magic, as the lazy cop-out solution, so too, not only the theologian, but also the atheistic scientific theoretician resorts to unobservable hypothetical ad hoc entities to rescue the core, pivotal, beliefs of materialist evolutionism. Therefore it is manifestly, in principle, also another religion that some have labeled scientism, a certain type of faith built on a certain type of evidence, and just like the more traditional religious faiths, there is no absolute proof, but certain lines of evidence. But, in reality, evidence for what, exactly? How much incredulity is contained within this naturalistic faith? How many different possible stories could there be to explain the same evidence, irrefutably? This falsification has for a reasonable amount of time been the so-called preferred methodology of scientific investigation, especially since all the low-hanging fruit of theoretical physics has already been picked long ago. The repeatable consistent effects of the laws of physics have been observed and measured to a remarkable degree of precision, but the fundamental explanation for their existence has remained elusive. Even if a multiverse existed, it fails to answer the most fundamental questions about the laws of physics. What are they made of? Why those particular values and not some other? It's a very deep mystery. If you do an internet search by typing the entropy problem and the past hypothesis, you might get the following statements. The past hypothesis is a fundamental law of physics in cosmology that states the universe began in a low entropy state. This hypothesis is a response to the paradox of how, according to an exclusively naturalistic assumption, the early universe could have been in thermal equilibrium, which indicates maximum entropy, while a logical backward extrapolation into the past retrodicts this idea, instead inferring the very opposite of these materialist assumptions as instead, also having a low entropy initial state. The past hypothesis is based on the second law of thermodynamics, which states that the entropy of a closed system never decreases. Applying this to the universe, the past hypothesis argues that the universe must have started with less entropy than it currently has, to preserve the arrow of time. In cosmology, the past hypothesis is a fundamental law of physics that postulates that the universe started in a low entropy state, in accordance with the second law of thermodynamics. The second law states that any closed system follows the arrow of time, meaning its entropy never decreases. Theoretical physicist Sir Roger Penrose has done a calculation of the probability of the universe's initial conditions based on known prerequisites, and so far he has calculated the unlikelihood of it being 1 in 10 to the power 10 to the power of 123, not only an outrageously crazy number overall, but even the denominator within that, so ludicrous, that if it were described by a singular number starting with a 1 followed by 10 to the power 123 zeros, so many zeros, roughly equivalent to the number of subatomic particles in the observable universe, let alone what this incomprehensibly vast number actually describes. In other words, you need virtually an infinite number of other universes, or perhaps at least 10 to the power 10 to the power 123 universes. Probably a lot more, vastly more given our currently limited understanding of the problem, to produce this theoretical likelihood of the initial conditions of our universe that we live in. It takes a great deal of faith to believe this particular picture of things, and it still doesn't account for the entropy problem within our universe since it began, especially with the complexities of biological evolution with regard to its specified genetic information and its vast plethora of irreducibly functional mechanisms, and even more problematic their sophisticated ability to reproduce and self-replicate. How does anything at all exist despite the relentlessness of entropy? This is by far the biggest problem for the materialist belief system, a problem so large, containing such a stupendous degree of required personal incredulity, that it cannot be faced empirically, and defies logic. The same has been said for belief in the existence of the Christian God Jehovah, who would have to be infinitely complex in his own right. Therefore any purely physical explanation of this more ordered beginning seems unsatisfactory, and actually not possible, thus requiring a certain level of faith in the unexplainable, for it logically seems that even a multiverse would intrinsically require some kind of a specified universe generator. And the entropy principle still implies a one-way direction to any changes that might occur, even under those extraordinary, hypothetical conditions, which points us to some kind of organizing singularity for its origin, and so far this kind of thing has only ever been known, or to be observed, coming from intelligence, if our past and present observations of our own world are anything to go by. And so, to the repugnance of committed materialists, the continuous relentless insidiousness of entropy, is perhaps the distinction we can derive from within all of that, which points us more toward the overwhelming likelihood of intelligent design, rather than design somehow coming from only unguided natural processes. So whatever our worldview, whether we are theologians or atheists when writing our epic novel, our minds are too feeble to come up with a complete satisfactory theoretical calculation for the origin of existence. We cannot fill the plot with logic, but we are instead condemned to pen miracles and hypothetical entities into our story, the ultimate cop-out, a black hole of ignorance that none of us can escape from. Ultimately, it does not belong to man who is walking, even to direct his step. Really, who do we think we are?